I want to talk about another topic, and that is the theme of yesterday's reading in the Torah. It appears that the two tribes of Reuven and Gad had sheep in great abundance, and the Israelites who were traveling through the desert confronted some of the Amorite kings and defeated them, inheriting their lands. Now, this was not part of the promised land initially to Abraham, which was west of the Jordan. These lands were east of the Jordan. And the people of Reuven and Gad looked at the land and assessed that these lands were good for only one purpose, and that was for raising sheep. And they were the shepherds. They were people who had many, many flocks and were very, very successful as shepherds. And the other tribes, although they had been shepherds, had other interests, and therefore didn't have that many flocks. They engaged in other areas of commerce or other pursuits and studies, and therefore didn't really have, in their minds, a care about the grazing lands on the east side of the Jordan. And therefore they came with a proposal to Moses that they would go and inherit the land east of the Jordan because they had flocks. Now these flocks were abundant. You have to realize that a shepherd is considered the lowest person on the totem pole. Although I've had several business people claiming that their type of business was considered the lowest on the totem pole, nonetheless, the shepherds were not considered honorable people because they would let their flocks graze in other people's lands, eating their produce. And so shepherds were the kind of people that you didn't want to have as next door neighbor. And so Reuven and Gad, who had been very careful with not taking that which didn't belong to them, really had a good reason why not to go across the Jordan, because were they to go across the Jordan, they would have become a suspect in the eyes of the other tribes of Israel. This way they could keep to themselves, graze their sheep at their leisure, and not be considered a pariah and considered someone who was suspect of letting his flocks consume other people's produce. And so this wasn't such a bad thing. So Moses' reaction is highly not understandable. Moses reacts violently and gets angry at them. How dare you? You know what happened 38 years ago when people were afraid to go into the land? Those people who refused to go to the land, they caused that God got angry with the people, and the entire generation died out. And now, by your action, you're going to cause God to be angry again. And they said, no, we're not going to stay here by ourselves. You're interpreting us as not wanting to go across like the people who were with the spies. The spies didn't want to go across the Jordan River because they wanted to remain as a nomadic group living off of God. They didn't want to engage in hard work and dealing with the land and the earth and dealing with society. They would rather live an idyllic life where spirituality ruled and people were able to spend long periods of time contemplating. And this, of course, was against the will of God. But Reuven and Gad, their argument was of a different nature. Not that they did not want to enter the land. It was just that their parnasa, their livelihood, would center around the things that they were most successful, which was the crops. So this was only normal that they be given those areas, and they added also, we will go across the Jordan and we will fight. In fact, not only will we fight, we will be at the vanguard. We're going to fight in the front lines. And we're going to go and fight with our brothers, and we will wait until the whole land is captured. And not only until the whole land is captured, but even when the tribes were dividing up the land, They didn't have to fight anybody. The people of Gad and Reuven remained on guard to protect their brethren while they were dividing up the land. This is a great thing. So why did Moses get angry? Now, I know that there are many, many different interpretations, but I wish to add my own. Since we are in the midst of the 3 weeks commemorate the destruction of the temple. What was the main sin that caused the destruction of the temple? And I might add, the main sin that allowed for the destruction of the Holocaust. The answer, the Talmud says, is uncalled for hatred. Sinat chinam. People suspected each other and disliked other people who weren't like them. Even among Israel. Remember, there were diverse groups. There were 12 tribes. Some of the tribes were fair-haired, and you would call them very white, and some of them were very dark. You would call them black. And some of them were in between. There was no single monolithic way in which the Israelites looked. David was fair-haired and was considered beautiful of eyes. He was red-haired. Most of Israel were Mediterranean, dark-skinned. And there were some who were darker than others and some who were lighter than others. And so there was a diverse group. There were people who were interested in commerce, people interested in agriculture, people interested in... They were a diverse group. And so people generally gravitated to people who they liked, who were similar to them. And that was the basis of Sinat Chinam. People disliked people who were unlike them. And that brought about the destruction of the temple. And that brought about also all the various sufferings that we've had over the years. Because you see, when people dislike each other, they spiritually weaken the entire group of people called the Jewish people. Because each person in Israel, you and I, each person among Israel, the people of Israel, is like a little limb of one great soul. And if I dislike another Israelite, then I'm saying God shouldn't like him, because I don't. And therefore, that is like you're cutting off the blood supply, which is the flow of love and energy that God has flowing throughout all of Israel. And you're cutting off that energy flow from that person because you dislike him. It could be even legitimate. He didn't pray correctly. So I'm not going to like him. Right? So now what happens is that person, the energy flow that flows throughout the entire body now has a constriction because I, who am a part of the Jewish people, am dissing that other guy. So that's cutting off his blood flow. You know what happens when you cut off the blood flow to one part of your body? The whole body suffers. And so, as a result of Sinat Chinam, hatred for no reason, that's the cause of all of the exiles. Now listen to this. At the root of Sinat Chinam is not really hatred. Nobody really likes to dislike someone. Nobody gets to know what he say. You know, today, I'm not going to like people who are plumbers. Especially plumbers who have brown eyes and black hair. I'm not going to like them. Or I'm not going to like electricians. Or today, I'm not going to like car dealerships. Nobody gets up and says that. What happens is a person gets up and thinks about themselves. And when they think about themselves, they worry only about themselves and worry about their families. And then anybody who they perceive as a threat to their own competitive edge, they dislike. And so it starts off with an unhealthy ego, an unhealthy love for yourself. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have an ego. It doesn't mean you shouldn't like yourself. It means an unhealthy love and an unhealthy ego, that you see the other person as a threat to you. The truth of the matter is, the other person is a benefit to you. You should welcome the other person and say, together we can make a great society. When you begin to think first and foremost only of yourself, not about the whole society, as part of the society, then it's unhealthy. And this is what the people of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, what they did. They started looking at what's good for me.